A simple woman thought she was buying a lifeless statue at a dusty auction, but unknowingly took home a man whose life had been stolen by betrayal. Behind his fate stood a ruthless uncle, ready to erase him forever to seize power. Yet fate had other plans, placing Nicholas in the hands of someone brave enough to defy it all. And just wait until you hear how this impossible story turned into a fight for justice no one saw coming. The sun hung low over Elm Creek, painting the sky in shades of muted gold as Emily Hunter parked her rusted pickup near the old fairground. It was the sort of place where dreams and disappointments often traded places, wrapped in the smell of fried dough and aged wood. Emily wasn't sure why she came. Perhaps it was the pull of curiosity or the quiet ache that had been following her since her mother's passing last spring. The auction had been announced in bold letters across town. Everything must go. One day only. It sounded more like a plea than a promise. She stepped inside the drafty hall, her boots clicking on the scuffed floorboards. The air hummed with chatter, a mix of farmers looking for spare tools and hobbyists hoping for a hidden treasure. Emily tucked a loose strand of chestnut hair behind her ear and tried to blend in, clutching her purse tighter. "Next lot up," boomed the auctioneer, a red-faced man with suspenders that creaked under his movements. "This here's a one-of-a-kind piece, straight from a modern art installation in the city. Folks, I give you the giant cowboy." The crowd turned as assistants wheeled out a towering figure, over 6 feet tall, wrapped in rough canvas and rope. Its head was covered with a burlap sack tied tightly at the neck. The cowboy boots and spurred heels peeked out beneath the hem of heavy fabric, their leather scuffed but sturdy. Laughter rippled through the room. "What is this? A scarecrow for millionaires?" someone shouted. Emily tilted her head. There was something oddly human about the way the figure leaned, almost as if its weight wasn't distributed like a mannequin's should be. But the thought passed quickly. "Starting bid, $2, the auctioneer barked. No hands went up. Silence stretched, punctuated only by a cough from the back row. The auctioneer's grin faltered. $2, folks. A piece like this could fetch thousands in the right gallery. Any takers?" Emily's heart thudded unexpectedly. She didn't need a giant cowboy, and her trailer had no room for it. Yet a quiet voice inside whispered, "Don't let it stay here. Don't let it rot under the dust." Her hand rose before her brain caught up. $2, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. The auctioneer's eyes lit up. "Sold to the young lady in the back. Congratulations, miss." The gavel came down with a snap, and scattered applause followed, some amused, some pitying. Emily felt her cheeks warm as she made her way to the stage. "You'll need a truck to move it," the assistant told her with a smirk. "I've got one," Emily replied, trying to sound confident. As they loaded the figure onto her pickup bed, Emily noticed a faint smell, earthy, metallic, and oddly out of place. She brushed it off, attributing it to the age of the materials. But across the street, hidden in the shadow of an old oak, a man in a tailored gray coat watched the scene unfold. His expression was unreadable as he raised a phone to his ear. "She bought it," he murmured. "Yes, exactly as planned." Then he melted back into the shadows, leaving only the whisper of a breeze where he had stood. Night had settled thick over Elm Creek by the time Emily backed her pickup into the narrow driveway of her trailer. Crickets sang in the tall grass, and the occasional passing car threw long, swaying beams of light across her walls. The towering cowboy figure loomed silently in the truck bed, wrapped in shadows, its presence unsettling in the dim glow of the porch light. She told herself she was being silly. It was just a sculpture, an odd, perhaps poorly executed piece of art that would probably end up in her shed until she figured out what to do with it. Still, as she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, a gnawing unease prickled at the edges of her thoughts. Sometime after midnight, a sound jolted her awake. It was soft at first, a creak, then a muffled thump coming from outside. Her pulse quickened as she strained her ears. Another sound followed, this one unmistakable, the faint scrape of rope against metal. Emily swung her legs over the side of the bed and slipped her feet into worn slippers. She grabbed the fireplace poker from beside the wood stove, gripping it tightly. As she edged toward the door, her breath caught in her throat. The truck bed was empty. The cowboy was gone. Then came a sound from the kitchen. A chair shifting ever so slightly on the linoleum floor. Emily pressed her back to the wall, her mind racing. She took a slow, careful step forward, the poker raised. The kitchen doorway yawned ahead, a rectangle of darkness. "Who's there?" Her voice trembled, but it was louder than she intended. Silence. And then, "Please, don't be afraid." The voice was deep and hoarse, as if unused for years. Emily froze. Her grip on the poker tightened until her knuckles ached. "Step out where I can see you," she demanded, her voice steadier now. A figure moved in the shadows, impossibly tall and broad. It ducked slightly to clear the doorway, and in the faint moonlight filtering through the curtains, she saw the burlap sack still covering its head. The rope that had bound its wrists now hung loose, frayed at the ends as if snapped. "Stay back," Emily warned, though her hands began to shake. The figure raised its arms slowly, palms out in a gesture of peace. "I mean you no harm. I didn't choose to be here." Emily's chest rose and fell rapidly as she struggled to process what she was seeing. With trembling fingers, the figure reached up and pulled at the knots of the sack. The fabric loosened and fell away, revealing a man's face, pale under streaks of grime with sharp cheekbones and eyes that seemed almost too clear in the darkness. "My name is Nicholas," he said softly, "and I need your help." For a long moment, Emily could only stare, unable to speak. The man's expression was a strange mix of exhaustion and quiet desperation, like someone who had been running for far too long. "What are you?" she finally whispered. He gave a weak, almost bitter smile. "Not what you think, but perhaps less than what I once was." A sudden noise outside, the crunch of gravel under tires, snapped Emily's head toward the window. Headlights swept past for a brief second before vanishing. Nicholas stiffened, his eyes narrowing. "They found me," he murmured, barely above a whisper. Emily's heart pounded as she glanced between him and the door. She didn't know who they were, but something in his voice made her believe he wasn't lying. "Why are they looking for you?" she asked, her voice tight with fear and curiosity. "Because they can't afford to let me live," Nicholas replied, his gaze fixed on the door, as if expecting it to burst open at any second. Emily felt the room tilt around her, reality slipping out of focus. She had bought a man at an auction. A man who wasn't supposed to survive long enough for anyone to realize he was still alive. Emily sat rigidly on the edge of her worn couch, her hands gripping her knees until her nails left crescents in the fabric of her jeans. Across from her, Nicholas leaned heavily against the kitchen counter. Even in the dim glow of the single overhead bulb, he looked out of place, his posture too controlled, his movements too deliberate for someone who claimed to be an ordinary man. Outside, the night air was still thick with the hum of insects, but Emily couldn't shake the sense that someone, was watching from beyond the thin curtains. "You need to explain," she said finally, her voice low but steady. "What are you, and why do you look like you've crawled out of a nightmare?" Nicholas exhaled slowly, as if each word he was about to say carried a terrible weight. "I was never meant to end up here," he began. His accent was faint but elegant, hinting at old-world roots. "I am, or rather, I was, heir to a small European principality. My family ruled quietly for centuries, always keeping out of global affairs. But peace doesn't last forever." Emily frowned. "You're saying you're some kind of prince? Why would a prince be wrapped up like a scarecrow and sold for pocket change?" He looked up, his gray-blue eyes shadowed with fatigue. "Because someone wanted me erased without causing noise. I was betrayed by those closest to me. They staged an accident, but I survived. Barely. I was hidden away until I could be transported out of the country under the guise of modern art. It was clean. Untraceable." Emily stared at him, trying to process his words. It sounded ridiculous, like something from a paperback thriller. Yet there was a raw honesty in his tone, a quiet desperation that felt too real to be faked. "Why not just finish the job there? Why bring you here?" "Because it's safer to make people believe I'm already gone, and because my enemies underestimated one thing." "What's that?" "That someone like you would intervene." Emily's mouth went dry. She hadn't intervened. She'd paid $2 at a dusty auction, acting on some foolish whim she couldn't even explain. Nicholas shifted his weight and winced. Only now did she notice the way he held his side, as though protecting a deep injury. "You're hurt." "It's nothing," he said quickly, but his pale skin and labored breathing told a different story. Emily grabbed a clean towel from a drawer. "Sit down. Let me look." He hesitated, but finally lowered himself into the chair at her kitchen table. As she pressed the towel against his side, she felt the rigidity of muscle beneath his tattered shirt. The faint smell of iron reached her nose, and she blinked back a wave of unease. "You shouldn't be here," Emily murmured. "I know," Nicholas replied, "but if I leave now, it's not just me they'll find. They'll come for you too." Her heart lurched. She hadn't thought of that. Suddenly, headlights swept across the room, cutting through the slats of the blinds. Both of them froze. A car engine idled outside, too quiet, too deliberate. Nicholas's jaw tightened. "They're early." Emily's hands trembled. "Who?" "The ones sent to finish what was started." For a moment, the only sound was the ticking of the clock. Then Nicholas's voice, calm but firm. "If we want to live, we have to leave. Now." Emily's thoughts raced as she stared at him. This man, this stranger, had pulled her into something far larger than she could have imagined. And yet, in his eyes, she saw not the arrogance of royalty, but the vulnerability of someone who had lost everything. Emily's hands trembled as she shoved clothes and supplies into a duffel bag. The air in the trailer felt heavy, thick with tension, and the faint scent of gasoline drifting in from outside. Nicholas stood by the window, his broad shoulders rigid as he peered through the blinds. "They're circling back," he said in a hushed tone. "We don't have much time." Emily's heart raced. She wasn't sure how her life had shifted from a quiet evening to planning a midnight flight with a stranger claiming to be a prince. But when she saw the headlights sweep past again, a cold certainty settled in her chest. Whoever they weren't here to talk. They slipped out the back door, moving as quietly as possible across the dewy grass. Nicholas kept close, his tall frame oddly graceful despite his injury. Emily's old pickup waited at the edge of the driveway like a loyal guard dog. She tossed the bag into the bed and climbed in. As she turned the key, the engine coughed before roaring to life. The sound seemed impossibly loud in the stillness of the night. "Go," Nicholas urged, his voice low but firm. Tires crunched on gravel behind them. In the rearview mirror, Emily saw the shadowy outline of a dark SUV pulling into her driveway. Its headlights flared like eyes in the night. Emily slammed her foot on the gas. The truck lurched forward, fishtailing slightly on the narrow road before gaining speed. Nicholas gripped the dashboard, his eyes darting between the side mirrors. "They won't stop," he said. "They can't afford to." "What do they want from you?" Emily asked, her voice tight as she steered onto the main road. "To ensure I never return," Nicholas replied grimly. "I carry information, names, accounts, plans. Enough to expose every one of them." Emily's grip on the wheel tightened. She didn't want to ask who "them" was, not yet. Behind them, the SUV's headlights grew closer. "Left up ahead," Nicholas instructed. "There's an old service road. We can lose them there." Emily yanked the wheel, sending the truck bumping onto a dirt path flanked by tall trees. Branches clawed at the sides, and the ride grew rougher with each passing second. The SUV followed, its lights bobbing like predatory eyes. Nicholas turned to her, his expression steady despite the chase. "You didn't have to do this. You could have left me behind." Emily shot him a quick glance, her jaw tight. Too late for that now. The road narrowed sharply, forcing Emily to slow down. The SUV closed in, its engine growling like a beast. Then, without warning, Nicholas reached for the handle. "Wait, what are you—" "Trust me." He pushed open the door just enough to let his arm swing out, sending a heavy chain tumbling from his grip. It wrapped across the narrow path behind them. Moments later, the SUV hit the chain with a metallic snap. Its tires screeched as it skidded sideways, crashing into the underbrush. Emily gunned the accelerator, and the pickup jolted forward into the darkness. Her chest heaved as she gripped the wheel, adrenaline pulsing like wildfire through her veins. "Where to now?" she asked breathlessly. Nicholas leaned back, his eyes on the road ahead. "Somewhere they can't find us. And then, I'll tell you everything." As the truck disappeared into the forest, The first streaks of dawn began to touch the sky, painting it in pale hues of blue and gold. The pickup sat hidden under the cover of tall pines, its engine quiet. Morning light spilled across the clearing, catching on the edge of Nicholas's profile as he stood watch. Emily leaned against the truck, her arms crossed, trying to calm the thrum of her racing heart. "You said they won't stop," she said softly. Nicholas nodded. "Not until I'm gone. Or they are." He turned to her then, his expression surprisingly calm. "You didn't have to come this far. You still don't." Emily shook her head. "It's too late to turn back." In the distance, faint dust trails curled into the sky, vehicles moving closer. Nicholas's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed steady. "This is where it begins again. For me, and maybe for both of us." Emily's hand brushed the door handle, her fingers curling around it. "Then let's not waste time." Nicholas looked at her, a flicker of gratitude in his eyes. "You're braver than most I've known." And as the first glint of sunlight caught the advancing cars, they climbed into the truck. The road ahead was uncertain, but neither looked back.